Hi, everyone. Welcome to Black in Focus. I'm Karen Toulon here at Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, and I am delighted to be here with Poku Spalding. She's the founder of the We Suite, which is a private network, community, and platform for women leaders and creators. Welcome, Dee.
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much for having me.
It is great to see you. So just in time for Mother's Day, we're going to be talking about women, the power of women, especially the power of Black women, as brand creators, influencers, and economy shapers, and Dee's all of those. And Dee, I guess I want to start off talking with you about the We Suite. After university in England, you started out in the film business here in the United States. As a marketing executive, and then you transitioned your skills and your network. And network is a word that we're going to keep on coming back to, skills and network, to form the We Symposium in 2010, and now the We Suite. Why all those changes, and why the We Suite? What is it that you saw in the marketplace or you didn't see in the marketplace that made you think we need this community, and you're the one to kind of bring it all together?
Absolutely. Well, I spent my career, the early part of my career, navigating corporate culture within the entertainment industry. And as we've all sort of read about, in the news and in the media, it's a very difficult industry. And as a woman, and certainly as a Black woman, sort of navigating those spaces, I often was the only, and wished I had access to a network to support me on my own career journey. And I think the higher up you go on the corporate ladder, the lonelier it gets. And so initially the We Symposium, which is a conference, and right now the We Suite, was very much sort of inspired by those personal experiences. Why don't we have business-oriented communities for women where we can really focus on leveraging our experience and our assets to support one another in the workplace in a really tangible and transactional way? So I'm not talking about community where, we're sort of sympathetic and say nice things and sort of listen and do things that friends do, but really sort of put money behind that, put relationships behind that, where we pick up the phone. We call it peer sponsorship, as opposed to sort of mentorship or anything else. So sponsorship means you're putting skin in the game. And that's really what the We Suite is about, as far as the relationships between the members.
Wow. And so from what I understand, membership has really kind of skyrocketed over the pandemic because people were really kind of cut off and needed each other even more. How large is membership right now? Where do you stand?
Yeah, membership has skyrocketed. I was terrified actually when the pandemic hit that we were going to go out of business, because I know that I was canceling, my $5.99 subscriptions. And so I thought, this is probably a sort of more luxury item for people. And so we might be one of the first things to go. And if anything, we sort of doubled, tripled in size over the last year. We have, a waiting list that's well over 1,500, 2,000 women waiting to join. I'm sort of excited to get them all on board. And I think it's because, we had a community when women needed it most. Founders were having to pivot their businesses, close their businesses, rethink the way they were connecting with their customers. Executives were having to furlough teams, cut back, manage teams virtually. Like, it was all very new for everybody. And all we could really draw on were each other's experiences. And so that's really where we came into our own.
Okay, so let's talk some tangible things that you have been doing. You have Black Women Raise as one of the groups that you started. I think that was right before the pandemic started, which is really kind of a unique group. Can you talk about what that group does in particular, and what women who belong to that group get out of that group and get out of those relationships?
Sure. I mean, Black Women Raise was inspired by my own experiences and the experiences of my friends trying to raise money in Silicon Valley. Black founders since 2009 have raised 0.0006% of available investment funding, which is a ludicrous number given that we start businesses at 40%, sort of, 4 times the sort of national average. And so it's a really dire situation. And so I wanted to sort of figure out how I could play a part. And everything I do comes down to community. I truly believe that the relationships you build are what sort of are how you sort of create sort of value for yourself and in your business in the world. And so I looked at what was happening in Silicon Valley, what the process was for raising money, and which is very much about having connections, warm introductions, having that sort of comfort level for investors. So how could I sort of support that and sort of recreate that for founders who may not have grown up in those networks, who may not have the uncle whose friend, works at a fund. And so Black Women Raise connects Black founders to funders. It's a very sort of simple model where we organize gatherings and bring together great founders who want to write checks to Black women and founders who we think should be invested in. And so the gatherings are intimate, and just sort of through those sort of smaller, more personal connections, those relationships are built that can then sort of amplify over time. So once you're sort of in the inner circle, you start to sort of build out, because the funders who come introduce you to their friends and to their friends and so on. That's really how networks are built. So that's really what Black Women Raise is about. It's a community for...
And Power of 8, that's
yes.
even a more refined group, if you will. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I just truly believe in, intimate connection, because I think that that's really where the sort of foundations of community building lie. I think, the prior model with sort of big conferences can be great, but, how sort of strong are the bonds that you would form with an investor you meet in a room full of 1,000 people versus, at a sort of smaller salon gathering. So the Power of 8 was really inspired by the racial reckoning we had over the summer, where I saw a number of corporations make pledges to diversify, to support the Black community in various ways. And I felt that there was a real opportunity for founders to really tap into that as well, and also to help those corporations put sort of real action behind those pledges. And so we, again, to the same model, we host smaller gatherings where we bring together 8 Fortune 500 corporations with promising, experienced Black founders. And what they get is those sort of, deeper introductions in a sort of smaller setting that get them sort of in the door and get them a sort of sponsor as they navigate corporations, which can be a very hard thing to do.
And these are corporations who are saying, we want to do business, we have a contract, we have a project that we would love to sign off to a Black-led company, but we just don't know exactly who or how. And on the other hand, these founders may not know how to navigate those companies, who to keep in touch with, because sometimes, from what I understand, these projects, even if there is mutual interest, it can still take months and months and months to make it work through the system. Is that right?
I mean, it's impossible to navigate those corporations. I'm in conversations with a couple right now for potential business partnerships, and it's a heavy lift. We hosted a conversation, a Power of 8 panel a couple of months ago, and we had Marla Blow on, who was then at MasterCard, and she had mentioned that it takes about a year to go through their due diligence process. So if you are a Black founder trying to build a business, managing your team, trying to drive revenue, and you then have to put in, all of that sort of time and energy into sort of navigating, a large business like that. I mean, I just think that you sometimes lose the faith, because they don't always pan out either. And what I know to be true is that when you have a sponsor within an organization, just to help guide you through the ins and outs of, of how their systems work, it can really sort of cut down on the time it takes. And so these introductions, I think, even if those specific individuals aren't the ones who are, looking for a relationship, they can help sort of guide the founder through the process.
And when I've spoken to a number of founders, Black women founders in particular, and they say that it is so difficult to go into when they're trying to do a raise, and they'll go into meetings and they have, as the young people say, they have receipts. I mean, they have proof that of concept. They have revenue, and it just is so hard to get funding. And they'll say, on the other hand, often or more frequently, certainly than their experience, white men will be rewarded for just having a really good idea, like a really wonderful idea, a remarkable idea, but won't necessarily have to have those receipts. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what advice or what counsel do you give women, or do you find the women in your network giving each other about how to go about that raise? When you go in, maybe get defeated the first time, how do you kind of regroup and rethink and go at it a second time or a third time or a fourth time?
I mean, so much of how Silicon Valley thinks about investing its money is through pattern matching. So they're looking at, how the market has performed before, who the founders are that were driving those businesses, and then they just want to sort of replicate on that success. And so if success to you looks like the founder of Facebook, the founders of Airbnb, the founders of Warby Parker, there's a common denominator there. Then when you walk in as a Black woman with a business where there's clearly a need and you've identified it, and perhaps you are your own customer, but you're sitting across from someone who just doesn't get it, then, it's a bigger hurdle for you to climb. And that's why there are certain types of businesses that for some reason, or for reasons just, identified, are able to raise, money so much easier. So we certainly need to have more women and more Black women within the investment community, where there can be that shorthand, where there is that understanding that the problem that you're trying to solve is a true pain point. That's certainly key, and I know that there are sort of some inroads being made there. But also, relationships count. If the introduction comes through a founder they trust, or person they trust, they are more likely to take you more seriously, which is why you really need to work to sort of build those strong relationships around you. Who introduces you really, really does matter. And so, like, all things being equal, like, you have a great idea, you have a great deck, you're great at pitching, like, you've done all of the basics. So I'm just assuming all that to be true. Mm-hmm. It's going to be so much more about who's making those introductions for you. And if you don't have those, and if you're really just kind of starting out, there are so many founder networks out there now that you can join. Some are free, some require a small fee, but they really sort of, I think that they're incredibly supportive because they allow founders to share their stories. And there is sort of nuance to how you approach these pitches. There's a nuance to how investors want decks to look like. They want them to be a certain number of pages. They want this certain kind of flow. There are people who write decks that look like the types of decks that investors want to see. So there are just so many, insights that you can get from being in a community where you can learn that.
And so, and that certainly is part of what the We Suite is able to provide. Are there, as we come out of COVID, again, I'll say allegedly, because not all things are equal. We know that recovery is not happening at the same pace around the world. It certainly isn't happening at the same pace around this country, and it's not happening within at the same pace within communities. We're getting the jobs data, for example, tomorrow, and we know at this point in time, for example, the unemployment rate for Black women is at 9% compared for 7.3% for Latinas and 5.2% for white women. So we know know equal isn't equal. But that said, theoretically, we're starting to turn the corner. Are there different opportunities as we're coming out of recovery for people who are entrepreneurial? And we know that women in general are very entrepreneurial, right? They're leaving the workforce more so than men for a variety of reasons. They have massive amounts of skills and creativity. They want to do things. They are change agents. Are there different opportunities now when you look out into the horizon?
It's certainly an interesting time. What I've been seeing is a particular interest in, because companies have had to retrain and sort of rethink the way they do business. Mm-hmm. Even though we're coming out of the pandemic, so many of the changes that were made through this period are going to stick, as far as flexibility, and sort of remote working. Companies are really, trying to think about how to better support mothers as they come back to the workforce. And so I'm seeing a lot of businesses trying to solve for that. So businesses that are trying to sort of solve for families, like, there are businesses around sort of caregiving and sort of, training and sort of support structures for new mothers. So and there's even a member of the WeSuite who has built a fund called Springbank Collective that's specifically investing in businesses that solve for the sort of issues that women face navigating the workforce. So I do know that there is, companies want to be part of the solution, and I think that if you are a business that can come to them with a turnkey solution that they can buy into, then you're definitely, will be on a winning streak. And I'm definitely seeing a lot of that sort of business right now.
And you said the WeSuite also has an angel investing kind of group. Can you share some details on that? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I mean, so, the foundations of the WeSuite is that, we are a community where we put our money where our mouths are. And it's very much about being sort of transactional in our relationships. If we see a need, we solve for it by making an introduction, making a referral, writing a check if that's within our means. Like, we're really thinking about how we can drive wealth to each other and to women generally. And so, again, over the summer, where, I think there's so many sort of big changes that we're seeing now sort of came out of that really important period where, the Black community, was sort of speaking out against injustice. One of our founders, posted to the group that she was investing in a Black founder, just in keeping with our values, and wanted to know if others wanted to sort of get involved. And quite a few people raised their hands, and we realized that we had a lot of angel investors within the community that we hadn't really considered. And then a member, sort of a few months later, one of our members, Rochelle Stewart, came to me and said, I want to sort of pull this together. I think we should have an angel network within the WeSuite community. We should pull together all these women who, are writing relatively small checks, $5,000 to $10,000 checks, if there are a few who are writing slightly bigger ones. But as a community, as a unit, we can amplify those efforts so much more. So wouldn't it be great if we could really pull together in that way? So Rochelle has been running the WeSuite Angels, and it's been amazing.
Wow. And do you think we were talking before we went live about the Black women unicorn problem solvers? Do you think we'll see more of those as those companies are successful?
I mean, I really think so. I mean, I think broadly speaking, women tend to tend to build businesses that solve problems for their communities. And so when you think of the three Black unicorn founders, Julia Collins, who is focused on sustainability, Sarah Menker, who's focused on agriculture, and Toyin Ajayi, who's focused on healthcare. I mean, they're solving some of the world's most pressing problems, and they happen to be the only three Black unicorn companies, female led around. And so just think about all of those companies who haven't received that investment, who have those sort of great ideas, and who have ways to solve problems that really support society, who aren't being invested in. And so, yes, I think that if we pay more attention to businesses that perhaps we don't understand, that may not necessarily be solving a problem, a personal pain point, but are solving problems for the wider population, we really should be looking at them.
And do you think, finally, my last question, I like to think about often things that are skills or assets that we may have as women, that we may not quite realize, that we may dismiss, we may take for granted and not really appreciate the value. Are there assets that women, or Black women in particular, may discount and not fully appreciate, that really do have real value, that are valuable if we just stop to just really listen?
The thing that I found interesting over the last year, and also the change of thinking, was that companies were being invested in purely for growth and not for revenue. So it wasn't really about like how much money, it wasn't about how much revenue you were driving. It was just about it was about how big an audience you could build. And so when the pandemic hit, these companies who weren't generating profits were suddenly stuck. And so the old-fashioned way of sort of building a business where you make money and then you invest your profits back into the business is suddenly back in vogue. And Black women have been doing this all along. Like, we didn't have that luxury. Like, we had to build businesses that made money. We had to do that to pay our employees. And so I think that is just something that we should be proud of. And it's a skill. We know how to make a dollar stretch a mile. We keep our businesses afloat despite underfunding for years on end until we get that sort of additional support. And I think that is our superpower, and never to be discounted. Yeah.
A dollar stretch a mile.
Absolutely.
That's something I grew up with as well. Dee, it's been great chatting with you. Thank you so much. So Dee Poku Spalding from the We Suite. Really, really great chatting with you. And that's going to be doing it for us here at Bloomberg Black in Focus. We'll see you next week. I'm Karen Toulon, and this is Bloomberg. Thank you.
Thank you.